Hi, everybody. This is Troy Hubble from YourDyslexiaExpert.com. I am here today on this dreary day in Portugal. We have some gray clouds outside and a little bit of rain. There was a storm that had been a hurricane and then a tropical storm. The water is too cold here for it to stay a serious storm, but we still have rain clouds and a little bit of wind and a lot of rain. So anyways, I'm sure you are here not to hear me talk about the weather, but to hear me talk about dyslexia. So today we're going to talk about spelling tests. A question that I've seen and that I've gotten numerous times is, how do I help my student with dyslexia do well on spelling tests? And the answer is a little bit tricky. There are some kinds of spelling tests that I really do care about how my students do. That being said, nearly always when I see a spelling test, it's a random list of words that either a teacher or a program has decided that students need to know how to spell. And my answer on such a test is I don't really care how they do. I care that they do their best because I think it's important that students learn that they need to work hard and do their best even when the task that they've been given maybe isn't the best task. That's part of life. But such spelling tests are not going to help our students in any way, and in fact are going to teach them to think about words in a way that's not particularly useful and that I don't want to reinforce. Let's look at why. I'm going to show you some examples of what I would consider to be good spelling tests and an example of what I would consider to be a bad spelling test. And keep in mind, I am not advocating for spelling tests necessarily. I do think there's a time and a place for them when they're done right, but I actually think the primary use of those tests is information for the teacher. If I've been teaching you a spelling pattern, that test is going to tell me whether you've internalized it or whether you need more practice. I don't necessarily want students to just focus on a certain list of words. So, with that being said, let's get started. Good spelling tests have a couple of features in common. The first is there's a clear purpose, and that purpose should be centered around either a spelling pattern or a particular sound. For example, in this list of words, like, fame, clone, perfume, all of these words have a vowel consonant E. This might be a list of words that I could use if I've been teaching students how to spell long vowel sounds with the vowel consonant E spelling pattern. And perfume might be a bonus word for my more advanced students because it's a multi-syllable word that still has that pattern. What makes this test a good spelling test is that I'm testing a predictable spelling pattern. All of these words are going to follow the pattern that I'm testing, and it's going to measure how effective my instruction has been in terms of teaching this pattern. This is another list of spelling words that I would consider to be a good spelling test. Sink, thing, thank, song, belong. The reason that I would say that this is probably a good list of words and a list of words that I would want some students to do better on or to spend some time on is because it's centered around a sound. It's centered around the sound. In the final position, we spell with an NG. In the medial position, it's usually going to be an NK. If I have taught students this and I want to see that they're hearing the sound properly and internalizing the spellings of that sound, this could be a really good list of words for me to be able to see that with. This is not ideal. These are a list of words that are very common, high frequency words that kids are going to encounter as very beginning readers. The reason that I say it's not ideal is that there are better ways to teach this. I'll show that in another video. The way that I think is the best is called heart words, because usually these words are only different from the pronunciation we would expect by at most one or possibly two sounds. So all we need to do is teach kids which letter is making the wrong sound, and that's the part they need to memorize. The rest they can sound out just like we want them to. But the reason that I put this as an example is even though it's not ideal, I could imagine a teacher saying my students need to know how to spell these, and they don't have the tools to sound them out yet. So I'm just going to have them memorize these very common, very high frequency words, some of which follow the spelling patterns that students are likely to know, such as closed syllables, and others of which, such as said, which we should pronounce said, do not. I think that's acceptable. Not ideal, but acceptable. This, though, is what I see almost always when I see a spelling test. This is not a test that I would want my student to devote a significant amount of time to. Here's why. We've got the word because, remote, lightning, timer, and present. There is no sound that we're practicing consistently through these words. And there is no spelling pattern that we're practicing consistently through these words. This is essentially just a random list of words. Here's the problem. Have you ever seen a student spell words like these right on a spelling test, but then spell them wrong immediately after when they're writing? Here's why. When we give students a list of random words, and we ask those students to memorize those words, we're having them engage their visual memory. That is largely going to be localized on the right side of the brain rather than the left side of the brain. And for those of you who know anything about how the brain reads, you'll know that that right side of the brain is what students who are struggling readers tend to use to compensate for the fact that they can't sound out words. When we give students a list of words to memorize, what we're actually and accidentally doing is teaching them to use their visual memory and memorize these words as lists of letters, or memorize them like a picture. And that is simply not how we read. Reading is a process of learning to connect sounds to spellings. When we're practicing in a way that connects sounds to spellings, that is going to help us read and help us become better readers. There are some words that we just have to find a way to learn and that are just difficult. And I do think that asking kids to use their visual memory just for these words is not ideal, but I do understand it. It's not a disaster. We do not want students just memorizing lists of words like this. When students spell these words, we want them to be very strategic in terms of breaking the words apart into syllables, and very strategic in terms of using spellings that accurately represent the sounds in those syllables and that are likely to be the proper spelling for those syllables. When we use a test to see how students are doing with those regular patterns, that's a valid use of a spelling test. When we use a test to ask kids to memorize a list of words, we're asking them to use a strategy that's not going to work and that they're not going to be able to replicate and use when they're actually writing. If I see a student with a list of words like this, and a parent asks me, how do I help my child do well on this spelling test? My answer is always the same. In front of the child, I say, how did your teacher ask you to practice? Practice that way. Again, I think it's very important. Sometimes in life, we are asked to do things that may not be the best use of our time. Learning that we have to complete that work regardless is an important part of growing up. But with the parent, I always follow up and say, hey, don't let them spend too much time on this spelling list because ultimately it's not going to help them very much. And I also tell the same thing to kids if they bring me a spelling list that they did bad on. I say, hey, I want to tell you about the time I applied for my dream job and they didn't hire me because of a bad grade I got on a fourth grade spelling list. And when the kids go, really? I always say, no, No one is going to remember how you did on a spelling test at some point in elementary school or maybe middle school. It doesn't matter. As long as you did your best, that's fine. This is not the best tool for you anyways. Because I don't want students thinking that spending their time memorizing these words is the most productive use of their time. So in summary, if you're getting spelling tests that practice a particular spelling pattern, that practice a particular sound with different spellings, or that practice those really common high-frequency words, I would say that's worth investing some time in with your child or with your student. If you're getting spelling tests that are a list of random words, I would not ever tell a child that they don't have to do it. I think doing your work is an important part of growing up, but I'm gonna make sure that I emphasize that what I care about is that they do the thing their teacher asked them to do and they do their best. I don't really care what their score is as long as they do those things. And in the back of my mind, I'm gonna know I don't want them spending a lot of time trying to memorize these words, because that's exactly the strategy that struggling readers use, and it's not gonna be a strategy that's gonna help them. If you have any more questions, please comment and let me know what I can do for you or how I can help. If you are struggling with something in reading, or you're wondering why a word is spelled the way that it is, or you're wondering how to help your kid with a particular challenge or issue, I am absolutely happy to make a video on that. And as always, if you know somebody who is struggling, please, please, please visit my website, yourdyslexiaexpert.com. I'm here to help, and I want to make sure that every student who crosses my path has the best chance of success. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, please like and subscribe to this video and this channel. It helps it get visibility so that other people who have students with dyslexia or children with dyslexia can find these videos. And I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. I will talk to you another time.